Hey everybody, Dog8798 here. This is my second rant on the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles fans. 2 years ago, when shortly after the 2014 TMNT film was released to theaters, I did a rant on the biased Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles fans hating on the Michael Bay produced Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles movie. This is my second rant, except this rant right here will be a rant on the entire fan base because, to tell you the truth, the entire Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles fan base get on my nerves, especially the fans of the original comics, the original 1990 movie, and of course, the 2003 series. These are the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles fans who get on my nerves the most. Of course, the biased Michael Bay haters. The main reason the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles fans get on my nerves is because the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles fans, because they grew up in the 80s and 90s, which is when the comics and the first movie came out, because they grew up in that time, they think they're cool and automatically better than anyone today who happens to like this new direction, the Ninja Turtles, these two new Michael Bay produced Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles movies. The Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles movies. I'm a huge fan of Peter Lairde and Kevin Eastman, but the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles comic book, the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles was a overrated, garbage, black and white comic book that took itself way too seriously. I've always thought, while I appreciate the comic books for starting it all, the cartoons, I always thought the cartoons were the best, especially the 80s cartoon and the current one on Nickelodeon right now, because these series knew that this was these shows knew because these two television series, they understood that both of these, that the Teenage Mutant Turtles, this is still cartoons, so you can't take it seriously. The comic books were like dark and violent, like Frank Miller's Daredevil and Batman and stuff like that. I remember reading a couple of comics back in 2009. This was before Nickelodeon acquired the rights to Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles and removed all the comics from the TMNT website. Um, I remember reading, and while the stuff was entertaining, I was disappointed first off by the fact that the comic books were black and white. I was disappointed by the fact the comic books were black and white. I like both comic books and manga, but I've always preferred comic books because I like color. I like color. Um, so I was disappointed by the fact that the comic books were black and white. That was the first problem. The second problem I had was that while I like the violence, I was disappointed with how seriously the comic books took themselves. This is a series about a group of talking turtles who do ninjutsu, who are trained by a mutant rat. And you have other crazy characters in here. Like one of my favorite villains, Rat King, Rat King, um, a mad scientist who uses mechanical monsters to take over a city, and they take all that seriously. And and one of the things I love about the cartoon was the cartoons had all that, but they remembered that they remembered that this was still a cartoon. They remembered the humor. They captured the perfect balance between action, drama, and comedy. But yet fans, because like I said, because they grew up with these original comics, they automatically think that they're cool, that they're hot stuff, because they supposedly did not watch or do not like the the Michael Bay produced Teenage Mutant Turtles movie. Then of course the 1990 movie. This movie, I like the original Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles films, but I think by today's standards, I think all three of them are kind of crap, are garbage. They're still entertaining. They're still fun and entertaining, but I find all three movies to be garbage. I think the second movie, The Secret of the Ooze, I think that's the best of the three. But I think all three movies are garbage. And in the first one, The first one is the one people like to overrate the most. They like to overrate the first one the most and act like it was this just because it followed the comic books, which in my opinion the comic books weren't really that good to begin with. Just because it followed the comic books, fanboys act like this is like the greatest movie ever made. This movie is some. Oh, not only is it the greatest movie ever made, but they act like it's this dark, violent movie just because we saw Raphael get jumped, a building get burned, and Shredder get crushed by a dumpster. They think this is like this ultra violent movie. There was no blood. No one in the movie died. Seriously, you think this is violent? Go watch other movies that were out around this time, like the Toxic Avenger, the Guyver movie. Um, well, what's it? The Dolph Lundgren's Punisher, Tim Burton's Batman. You want to see dark and violent and edgy. Edgy. This movie right here is this movie. All three of them are overrated puppet show kid movies. That's what they are. But people act like these are like the greatest films of all time. Even the critics thought so. This film had mixed reviews, had mixed to negative reviews, just like the modern Ninja Turtles movies have. They had mixed. They had a 40%. I think the second one had a 30-something%, and the third one had a 20-something%. The third one, which was hated the most. But people act like, oh, the first is the opinion is pretty much the first one is this is the like the best film ever. The second one is it has a mixed reception. Some people like it, some people don't. It's widely considered good, but not as good as the first. Then you got the third one, which is widely considered to be garbage. In my opinion, all three of them were garbage, with the second one being the best. I'll talk more about the quality of the Ninja Turtles, of the three Ninja Turtles movie in a separate video. But this is right here just me just criticizing the fanboys who think they're all that because they watched the original movies and read the original comic books. There's several different versions of Ninja Turtles. There's several different versions of Ninja Turtles, and like I said, the comic books and the original three movies, they were terrible. I've complained about this once. I'll complain about it again. Let's start off with the plot of the first movie and the plot of the comic books, which are both identical. The first movie, they expect me to believe that Shredder, the comic books is able the movie is supposed to expect me to believe that Shredder can, with the use of a foot, can take over the entire city without the usage of weapons. And when I'm saying weapons, I'm talking about guns and stuff, guns and stuff. They can take over. They can have this grip over the city, and no one knows. No one knows. Then, when it comes to fight sequences, even though the turtles apparently can do martial arts, Turtles and Casey can do martial arts and fighting better, they still want to fight with weapons. And they still want to fight with weapons like axes, swords, and knives and stuff. But no one in this universe has a gun. That's in the movie. No one in this universe has a gun. He plans to take over the world with just ninjutsu. No one in this universe has a gun. Like I said, Shredder in the first movie, he wasn't believable. In the second movie, he was more believable because he got two mutants to do his dirty work for him. It was more believable. In the comic books, it has the same plot, except in the comic books it's a little bit better because the Shredder does have like a day job. He does have a different job in the daytime to cover up his criminal activity, but it's very much the same thing, and it's very much the same thing. He's able to take over the world pretty much using ninjutsu. Then in the comic book, the turtles defeat him. So you're trying to tell me turtles, ordinary turtles who are mutated by ooze can beat Shredder, can beat Shredder, a ninjutsu master at his own game, who are trained by a rat, can beat Shredder's own game. Then in the movie, Splinter, just after watching his master perform martial arts, he's all of a sudden can beat Shredder in a martial arts match. Then Shredder, of course, just charges at Splinter like a cartoon character, and Splinter just uses his nimchucks, flips him over, and Casey commits murder by having a dumpster crush him, and Shredder somehow survives that, but but a super Shredder can't survive a dock falling on him. Just stupid, dumb, just stupid and dumb. The modern movies were much better. Here, it took the Turtles, April, and a giant fall to defeat Shredder, and he fell and survived, and instead was arrested and came back in the second film. Like I said, much more believable, and And people, like I said, still act like this film is still good today when it isn't. The biggest problem with the film, besides the writing, besides the story, the weak story, the biggest problem with the original films is pretty much budget. Is pretty much budget. Everyone talks about how great the costumes were. The costumes were great, but the turtles, they can't even move in those costumes. If you've seen the comic books, the cartoons, the turtles can do all this amazing stuff. Can jump rooftop buildings, can flip and do all this acrobatic stuff. And yet in the movies, they can barely jump in those costumes. They can barely move in those costumes. Their fight scenes look worse than Power Rangers. The fight choreography in the original. Yet people like to act like what's his name? And then because it's real people in suits, people like to act like it's more real than the modern turtles when it's the same thing, except in the new turtles it's motion capture. They have people they have people in mocap suits, then they CGI, they draw and CGI the turtles over their movements. It's the same thing, except better, much better, much better. Like I said, this was my rant on the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles fans. And the first film was criticized, but they praised the turtles, the voice acting, Arnett, and they praised Will Arnett, who I think got a nomination. He got a award for his role in the film. The sequel, the sequel. This is one of the things I love about Michael Bay. He does listen to criticisms and try to improve them in his next film, and he did that here. Out of the TMNT Out of the Shadows took everything that was good about the original Ninja Turtles and made it better, and everything that was bad, they either got rid of it completely or made it better, and they also made it even closer. It made it even closer to the cartoon series. You got most of these films out today which stay completely away from the source material, but Michael Bay did all that. In the film, people talk about the critics, while the thing has a 35% is mixed to negative. If you go read the reviews on Rotten Tomatoes, the critic reviews, they're mixed. Some people like it, some people don't. Which was pretty much the critical reception of the original three, especially the first two. Most people liked it. A lot of people didn't. Mostly the fans like it. The fans like it was this great movie. Only lame fanboys like yourself think those original three movies were good. The critics, most of the critics at that time absolutely hated those movies, and they hated these too. Some liked them, some didn't, but mostly the fans liked it. But this was just my rant because I'm sick of people thinking that they're all that because watched the original movie, and read the comic books and just think they're all that because they supposedly didn't see this movie and just keep coming at this movie with bias hatred and just dumb criticisms like criticizing the turtles' faces, saying they're ugly. This is a film about mutant turtles who are outcasts. They are not going to be pretty looking. This is a movie about mutant turtles. Yeah, that dumb stuff about turtles putting on disguises in a trench coat, it doesn't work. Doesn't fly now. Well, like I said, this was my rant on the TMNT fans. All right, I'm done.